Hello, universe. Welcome to my world. When we listen to Angelina Jordan, she takes us back. Sometimes she takes us back to the 40s, sometimes she takes us back to the 60s. But let's take it one step further and let's look at the last 100 years of history and let's illustrate it with Angelina Jordan's songs. So first we'll start with 1930. And already at the start of that year, the Great Depression had gripped us, and people were lining up for soup and bread. By 1932, we had FDR starting the first of his 4 terms, and he gave us the New Deal. In the 30s, we had the beginnings of the movie industry as a form of escapism for us to forget our daily life.
Yesterday, all my troubles seem so far away.
But by the late 30s, the world was headed toward the edge of a cliff. In the mid-30s, there was a Hungarian songwriter who wrote Gloomy Sunday, which is known as the Hungarian suicide song. And it really captures the mood of the 30s. It had the despair of the Depression, and by the late 30s, the drum beats of war could be heard. This was Angelina Jordan's opening performance for NGT.
Angels I know by, I'm never returning you. Would make me angry if I fully join you.
And afterwards, one of the judges asked her, "Do you know what this song is about?" And she said, "Yes, it's a sad song." He nodded his head because he knew it was a song about suicide, but it was a perfectly accurate answer from a 7-year-old.
Vet du hva sangen handler om?
Ja, det handler om en trist søndag.
Det gjør det.
Next, we move on to the 40s. And for the first 4 years of the 40s, the world was falling into the abyss. These were bleak times indeed. In 1944, we had the Big Three meeting at Yalta to decide the New World Order. In 45, there were worldwide celebrations for the end of the war. And this iconic photo captures a new era with the advent of the baby boomers.
Baby, baby.
Shortly thereafter, we had the founding of the UN.
Hear the word, and make it a better place for you and for me and the entire human race.
And everyone could watch all of these events unfold on their new televisions. It's an old Arab proverb, "May you live in boring times." And the 50s were defined by peace and prosperity. It was a decade of apple pie and appliances. And here in Europe, we decided we've had enough of centuries of warfare. And they decided to form the common market to prevent future conflict.
It's now or never. Tomorrow will be too late.
The 60s started with the election of JFK. It felt like a new era. It felt like a new beginning. And shortly thereafter, we had the era of the hippies, where everyone was wearing flowers in their hair. It was an era of peace and love. Angelina Jordan captured the idealism very well with the Beatles song, "Here Comes the Sun."
Here comes the sun. Here comes the sun.
But looking back, maybe all of that idealism was a little bit
Crazy.
And of course, in the late 60s, we had Neil Armstrong.
Fly me to the moon and let me play among the stars. Let me see what spring is like on Jupiter and Mars.
The early 70s were a strange time. The Beatles and the folk and the rock and the soul and the rhythm and blues movements evolved into something very different. In England, we had glam rock, and in America, we had the origins of the funk movement. By the mid-70s, we evolved again, and we had the arrival of disco.
And so you're back from outer space. I just walk into fire with a sad look up on your face. I should have changed that stupid lock.
Politically, we went from the convulsions of Watergate to the innocence of a peanut farmer. And also in the 70s, we had the arrival of feminism.
You make me feel, you make me feel, you make me feel like a natural woman.
In the mid-70s, from London, we had a new rock group by the name of Queen with Freddie Mercury, and they had instant success with their original Bohemian Rhapsody. Little did they know that 45 years later, they would be congratulating a 13-year-old Norwegian girl on her interpretation of the song.
Any way the wind blows doesn't really matter to me.
Anywhere the wind blows doesn't really matter to me, to me.
Wow.
The 80s opened with the eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington state.
Fire, normally kill us.
And also in the early 80s, we learned a new word. We combined the word Reagan, as in Ronald Reagan, and the word economics, and we had Reaganomics, which greatly increased the national debt, but everyone was very happy because there was much more money sloshing around, and it was an age of materialism.
Diamonds are forever. They are all I need to please me.
Also in the early 80s, there was a strategic defense initiative, otherwise known as the Star Wars Shield, which would protect us.
Please be my shield against all that's blue. Keep me from danger. Don't leave me too soon.
Internationally, Ronald Reagan met with Mikhail Gorbachev,
Just the two of us. We can make it if we try.
and at the end of the 80s, we had the fall of the Berlin Wall. And when we hear the song Writings on the Wall, it has two meanings. It means there's graffiti on the Berlin Wall, but it also means that the collapse of the Soviet Empire is inevitable.
How do I live? How do I breathe? 'Cause of right on the wall.
And so it proved. In the 90s, we had the collapse of the Soviet Empire, which President Putin describes as the greatest geopolitical disaster of the 20th century. And we are still very much paying the price for those events now.
If I hurt you, turn to me.
And also in the 90s, we had the arrival of the internet and all of its implications.
Play the game. It's up to you.
In the new century, we had one of the most iconic events in world history when the Twin Towers collapsed.
Just stop your crying, it's the sign of a time. We gotta get away from here. We gotta get away from here.
And that was followed by the controversy of WMD, weapons of mass destruction, which would influence whether war was to follow or not.
Show must go on, yeah. Inside my heart is breaking.
Also, at the turn of the century, we had more and more the issue of climate change in front of us. We had the unpredictability of the weather, many levels,
Ain't no sunshine when she's gone.
And with the rising sea levels, we really needed to, in our most recent decade. First, we had Barack Obama as the US president, and there was some controversy about his origins.
You be my American boy, American boy.
And then in 2016, we had the election of Donald Trump.
Seems like it was yesterday when I saw your face. You told me how proud you were. If only I know what I know today.
With his forays into foreign policy.
Put a spell on you because you're mine. I ain't lying.
And here he is talking about how him and Kim Jong-un exchanged love letters.
All your love, I want your drama.
So that takes us to the present. We've gone from 1930 to 2023, and we've also gone from Angelina Jordan, age 7, singing Gloomy Sunday, to the present. I would say that they're both. Okay, gang, we've had quite the tour today. I'm out of here. I'll catch you later. Bye.